In Cherokee tradition, there is a legend known as the Tale of Two Wolves. It tells the story of a grandfather explaining to his grandson that there is a battle that lives within each of us. One wolf is evil, driven by anger, envy, greed, arrogance, and resentment. The other is good, fueled by kindness, humility, empathy, and peace. The boy listens carefully, then asks his grandfather, which wolf wins? To which his grandfather replies, the one you feed. Stories like this are more than simple lessons. Across Native communities, storytelling has always been a way to pass down knowledge and values, teaching survival, respect, and how to live in a balance with others and the land. These stories carry layered lessons that still resonate today. At its surface, the Tale of Two Wolves may sound like a story about emotions, but at its core, it's really a story about choice. The choices we make, especially when we're under pressure, when we feel threatened, or when our place in the world feels uncertain, reveal which side of ourselves we're feeding. History shows us time and time again that individuals, communities, even entire nations face this same internal battle. Moments when the urge to respond with fear, violence, or control feels overwhelming. And yet, some choose a different path, one of restraint, understanding, or even peace. Sometimes those choices don't just shape us, they shape history itself. This is Watch Her Cook. Hello everyone, I'm Cassie.
And I'm Danielle.
Welcome back to Watch Her Cook, a podcast dedicated to sharing the incredible lives of women who have taken their power back throughout history.
For those of you who have been along for the journey over the last few months, you may be wondering, how is it that we select stories? Like, what's the process that we have? And there isn't much of a process other than thinking of women that we either learn about in passing or have learned of a little bit in history class or growing up and we want to know more about. And this one in particular, the subject of today's story, I suggested because I spent a lot of time out in Colorado. I lived there for many years, and I lived in an area that had a lot of things named after Chief Ouray, who we'll talk about a lot in this episode. There's towns named after him, streets, restaurants, different outfitters, different landmarks within the mountains. And he did a lot of good, but there is one figure in his story who was right alongside him for most of his adult life that isn't really discussed, and her name is Chipeta. And that is who we are going to be talking about today.
I love hearing I don't want to call her an underdog because she's not, but just women who are not recognized is kind of the bread and butter of this podcast. So excited to talk about her today.
Well, let's get to know her. Chipeta, known as the Queen of the Utes, was one of the most respected Native American women in history. During the early years of colonization, she stood out as a wise leader, a protector, and a strong voice for peace between the Ute people and the U.S. government. Before we get into her story, we want to acknowledge that while we highlight a few key historical moments in Native American history, it really just scratches the surface of the deep, complex, and often painful history of the Native American people. There are many, many more layers of experiences and acts of resilience than we have time to cover here.
Chipeta, whose name means white singing bird, was born around 1843 in what is now Conejos, Colorado. Although she was born into Kiowa Apache tribe, she was later adopted by the Uncompahgre band of the Ute tribe, likely after being separated from her birth family. The Ute people are one of the oldest indigenous groups of the American West, with ancestral homelands spanning the mountains and deserts of present-day Colorado, Utah, and parts of New Mexico and Wyoming.
For thousands of years, the Ute people maintained a deep spiritual connection to the land, thriving through hunting, gathering, and later developing a rich horse culture after horses were introduced by Spanish settlers. They preserve their history and way of life through traditions, song, storytelling, and ceremonies. Like most Native American tribes, they were grounded in shared responsibilities. Women played central roles in maintaining the camp, preparing animal hides, and ensuring the well-being of their families. Men primarily hunted game, provided protection, and taught essential survival skills.
In the 1600s, British settlers began colonizing North America and claiming territory along the East Coast. They saw the continent as a place for economic opportunity and religious freedom, space that they could use for farming, natural resources, and permanent settlements, ignoring the reality that Native Americans had cared for the land for thousands of years. For others, colonization was driven by competition among European powers, eager to control new territories and resources. Native American people were displaced through unfair land deals, violence, and the introduction of deadly diseases, like smallpox, which devastated indigenous communities who had no natural immunity to these foreign illnesses. Millions of Native Americans lost their lives in the first centuries of European colonization. These areas along the East Coast became known as the 13 colonies, which included places like New Hampshire, our home state, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island.
During the 1800s, many U.S. leaders and settlers were determined to expand the nation's territory from the Atlantic Ocean in the east to the Pacific Ocean in the west. This belief, known as manifest destiny, was embraced by Americans who saw it as their right and even their duty to control the land. This belief resulted in the Mexican War, where both groups fought for ownership. The American influence continued to grow between 1858 and 1859, when gold was discovered near present-day Denver, Colorado. During this time, anywhere from 50,000 to 100,000 miners and settlers migrated to the Rocky Mountains in an attempt to strike fortune, a period that became known as the Colorado Gold Rush. This led to the rapid growth of towns like Denver and Boulder, primarily affecting the Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Sioux tribes. Although treaties were put into place to define territorial boundaries, they were often ignored by settlers and miners.
At first, the Ute people welcomed settlers. The natives could trade items such as beaver pelts, robes, and buckskins in exchange for tools, guns, and alcohol. However, it started to become clear that their values were vastly different. The settlers overhunted, littered, and did not like to share with their community. The Ute people attempted to scare away the newcomers, but were outnumbered and challenged with land titles, which were legal documents purchased from the U.S. government, claiming the land belonged to those who carried them.
And before we go on, just to comment really quickly on manifest destiny, because I think that is, I know it was definitely a big chapter in my U.S. history book and curriculum in high school. And I think just reflecting back on it, there was almost this sense of like, even learning about it, that it was this sense of like pride, like national pride of like, this is our duty. This is like what we were supposed to do. And maybe the tone has changed to better represent and reflect all aspects of the story, not just a one-sided version that I'm pretty sure I learned in the early 2000s. But as far as like why settlers felt so entitled to this westward expansion and total control of land that clearly was not theirs, Manifest Destiny also had woven into it, like there was also religion that was woven into this, and it was kind of like even ordained by God that it was their duty to do so, to claim land from the east to the west. And I think they use that as an excuse or a crutch for their reasoning.
To kind of make okay what they were doing, which also is interesting because they fled Europe for religious freedom and freedom from persecution. And then they came to the United States and kind of implemented what they had been raised on in Europe. And I think the name Manifest Destiny is so intriguing because it sounds like this really beautiful concept. You know, if you don't know what it is, you're like, Manifest Destiny. It just
very
sounds
sugary.
really good. Yeah. It's so good. But then you really learn about what it is. And it's these people who came over, felt super entitled to land that wasn't theirs. And it feels like They came over here expecting there to be this land that was completely void of people, and they've found this promised land that they can now create their own country on. And they're deserving of that. They had that vision, and then when that didn't pan out, they're like, well, that doesn't matter because we do deserve this. We just have to now get this small problem out of the way and take over that, and then it'll be beautiful promised land of ours. And it's been sugar-coated throughout history that we came and were peaceful with Indigenous people. And that, I mean, I remember learning in school that we came over from Europe, we had dinner with Indigenous people, and we all shared a great Thanksgiving dinner. And the reality of it is we murdered, raped, destroyed tribes of people, thousands, took over land that wasn't ours, brought disgusting diseases. And to this day, I mean, we're still seeing a fight over land where we promised all of these deals once we took over that we would allow the people who have been here for thousands and thousands of years to keep their lands. And still now in 2025, we're still actively taking those lands away that have been promised for generations.
All I can think of is just like the audacity of, I mean, and also just like you said, they had this vision, and then when it didn't pan out, the only thing I was thinking is, so they're like, okay, plan A didn't work. So how can we still have the same end result? We need to improvise. Okay, well, we can do this because God said so. And then when they're like, okay, we don't worship your God, we don't understand, that means nothing to us. Then they're like, oh, actually, we have this piece of paper. It's like a piece of paper by who we are not part of that government. Like, what are you talking about? You know, it's just like they're making these things up to justify their end goal. And it's just so frustrating to see. And of course, like so infuriating to the Ute people specifically in this story. But of course, it can be, you know, expanded to others as well, because this has happened to many other different nations in a similar way. But it's just, it really sets the framework and the foundation to what is about to unfold, and kind of just gives a peek into the very seed of beginnings of just anger and resentment. One of my favorite things about my rental is the outdoor space, specifically the outdoor pizza oven. It's perfect for get-togethers and make your own pizza parties, but when I moved in, the space was lacking something, and that was decor. I really wanted to host a housewarming / MYOP party, but because schedules were hectic and crazy, I didn't have a ton of time to get the space prepared. But that was no worry with Wayfair. They got my items to me so fast, and the delivery was hassle-free. I needed some seating options, an outdoor rug, and some garden lighting for ambiance, and I got it all from Wayfair. They've got you covered for all your decor needs, from conversation sets, chase lounges, lawn games, planters, heaters, outdoor bars, and so much more. Their online section of outdoor items makes it super easy to find exactly what's right for you, what's calling to you, what your needs are, what the vibe you want to create is, and now is the time to do it. With summer upon us, everyone is really anxious to be outside, so make it stylish and comfortable with Wayfair. And for those rainy days, they've got you covered too. No matter your space or your budget, there's something for every style and home with free and easy delivery. Shop outdoor furniture, grills, lawn games, and way more for way less. Head to wayfair.com right now to explore a huge outdoor selection. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home.
When it comes to grocery shopping and meal planning, I've got this problem. I want to eat healthier, but I just don't have the time or energy to plan it all out, let alone roam the grocery store aisles after a long day. I get overwhelmed, grab random stuff, and end up eating the same 3 meals on repeat. But that has all changed thanks to Hungry Root. It's honestly the easiest way I've found to eat healthy without the stress. Hungry Root is having your own personal nutritionist and grocery shopper rolled into one. You tell them your dietary preferences, health goals, even the foods you don't like, and they fill your cart with smart, personalized recommendations. The best part, it gets better over time. The more you use it, the more it learns what you like. Whether you're looking to go gluten-free, dairy-free, high-protein, anti-inflammatory, you name it, Hungry Root's got options. And the meals, so quick. I've made full dinners in 15 minutes flat. Plus, they don't just send meals. You get healthy snacks, smoothies, ready-to-eat foods, even supplements. And everything is made with clean ingredients. No artificial junk, no weird preservatives. I've discovered so many new things I never would have picked out on my own, and I've actually been excited to cook again. I really do love it, and I know you will too. You're going to love Hungry Root as much as I do. Take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/watchhercook and use code watchhercook. That's hungryroot.com/watchhercook. Code watchhercook to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/watchhercook. Code watch her cook.
So around this time, when Chipeta was approximately 15 or 16 years old, she met Ouray, whose name means arrow. He was born in 1833 near what is now Taos, New Mexico, into a mixed background. His father was Jicarilla Apache, and his mother was a Ute. Ouray spoke several languages, including Ute, Apache, Spanish, and a little English, and had established a relationship with the Americans through contact with traders both before and after the Mexican War.
Ouray was still mourning the loss of his first wife, Black Mare, who had passed away after giving birth to their only son. Some records suggest Chipeta was a sister or cousin of Black Mare, however, the evidence is unclear. She was chosen by the family to care for their child and manage the household, but her role quickly grew and the two got married in 1859.
In 1861, Colorado officially became a U.S. territory, marking a significant turning point in the region's history. The establishment of the Colorado Territory encouraged even more settlers to move west, lured by the promise of gold, land, and new opportunities. Territorial status also meant that the U.S. government had greater control over laws, land policies, and interactions with native tribes. This marked the beginning of more organized efforts by the U.S. to take control of Colorado, leading to further displacement.
Somewhere between 1860 and 1863, Ouray was appointed chief of the Uncompahgre tribe following his uncle's passing, and it wasn't long before Chipeta became his trusted advisor. That same year, Ouray reached out to Christopher Kit Carson, a well-known Indian agent who was a U.S. government official appointed to manage relations between the U.S. and the tribes. Kit introduced Ouray to Lafayette Head, a former Indian agent and political leader in Colorado who recognized Ouray's language skills and hired him as a translator. Through Lafayette, Ouray met with Territorial Governor John Evans, who was responsible for overseeing Colorado's government and Native affairs. After their meeting, John wrote to President Abraham Lincoln suggesting a formal treaty council between the U.S. government and the Ute Nation.
Ouray was invited to Washington, D.C., the farthest a Ute had ever traveled, where he was given a silver-headed cane by Lincoln as an acknowledgement of status and a symbol of partnership. When he returned home, he shared stories of his journey with Chipeta, who listened closely. Chipeta encouraged Ouray to be cautious, reminding him that promises from U.S. officials did not always protect Native people. Together, they discussed how to prepare their community for the changes ahead.
These discussions led to the Treaty of Conejos, signed between the U.S. government and the Tabawach Band of the Ute tribe, which included the Uncompahgre Utes. Under the treaty, the Utes ceded land east of the Continental Divide in exchange for retaining lands to the west. The U.S. government also promised to protect the remaining Ute territory and provide between $10,000 to $20,000 worth of food and provisions annually for the next 10 years.
The agreement was bittersweet. While Ouray negotiated with U.S. officials, Chipeta played a vital role in mediating the concerns of the Ute people. Some Ute families doubted Ouray's close relationship with settlers, but welcomed Chipeta with open arms. Her reassurance reminded them that peace was their best defense. She relayed the needs of the community to Ouray, who trusted her direction. When Chipeta asked to accompany Ouray to future assignments, he agreed.
We're starting to see Chipeta more in this and her influence over people. Why do you think people trusted her so much?
I mean, I think there is something to be said about she's clearly not only Ouray's wife, but a trusted confidant. Like, he is clearly paying attention to her insight, her opinions, her advice. And I think that people are catching on to that. Mm-hmm. And she's also not just 100% on board with her husband either. I think it's very easy for them to see that she is kind of like the safe middle ground that is kind of like us. I just envision, what is it, like the scale of justice that's just like she's balancing like both sides. She's not all on, you know, the people's side or all on her husband's, and she's just doing the best she can to relay information and kind of just make the best of this clashing of worlds. And I like, that's the first thing that comes to mind for me, as far as at least how her people looked at her initially out the gate during this entire thing.
She feels very level-headed. Like, she feels like she doesn't get she obviously cares very deeply, but she doesn't get overly emotional or over rational. It seems like she's always trying to mitigate in a way that benefits her people and negates any violence that would come to them.
Right, because we're in this position in this time in history that they also recognized was pivotal, you know, and she knew that just as much as Ouray and everyone else on all sides. And she didn't take that lightly. And she really advocated for not just boldly being like hardline, no negotiation, and we're just going to stay steadfast in what we want, because she recognized that that's not the world in which we are in right now. And I want to make sure that our people have the best chance at continued survival. And what does that look like? And how can I make that happen? And I think they trusted that.
Yeah, I think that they did too. But of course, now we know throughout history that trust was broken. The confidence in the treaties were quickly shattered 1 year later on November 29th, 1864, when a devastating and violent attack on Native American people took place. Colonel John Chivington led 600 Colorado Territory militia soldiers to the Sand Creek Camp, an area made up of over 500 Cheyenne and Arapaho people, in an event that became known as the Sand Creek Massacre. Over 150 Native Americans were brutally killed, the majority of them being women and children. Once dead, the soldiers allegedly mutilated their bodies and robbed them of their jewelry. The goal was to continue efforts to eliminate Native Americans from desirable lands and paint the settlers as heroes for removing who they believed to be a threat.
The massacre was a wake-up call. It showed that the government was not willing to honor their treaties. Not long after, in 1871, the U.S. government passed the Indian Appropriation Act, which declared that Native American tribes were no longer recognized as sovereign nations. Before this act, tribes were treated as independent groups with their own governments, capable of negotiating treaties like foreign countries. Afterward, they were considered wards of the federal government, with no new treaties allowed.
By 1873, growing pressures from miners, prospectors, and the U.S. government made it nearly impossible for the Ute people to hold on to their ancestral lands. The discovery of gold, silver, and other valuable minerals of the San Juan Mountains brought a flood of settlers and mining companies into southwestern Colorado, territory promised to the Ute Nation under earlier treaties. Despite these government promises of protection, encroachment escalated rapidly.
Faced with the threat of violence and knowing the Utes were outnumbered and outgunned, Ouray and Chipeta once again entered negotiations with U.S. officials, determined to protect what remained of their people's land. The resulting deal became known as the Bruneau Agreement. named after U.S. Commissioner Felix Bruno. Under this agreement, the Utes ceded nearly 4 million acres of land in the mineral-rich San Juan Mountains to the U.S. government. In return, they were promised $25,000 annually in cash, goods, and supplies, as well as continued hunting rights on some of the ceded land. The U.S. government also vowed to respect and protect the remaining Ute territory in western Colorado.
Right, because you're going to believe that. We vow this time.
No, like really, we promise now.
Yeah, we promise now. I know last time we promised, but this time we're serious.
And it just kills me because to know, clearly I knew that this happened, but I didn't know the actual numbers and figures associated with these quote unquote deals. And of course, $25,000 in 1860, whatever, is quite different than today. But even that, not that you can even put a price on ancestral homelands, but of course they're trying. And that is such a bad deal. I mean, like, it's insulting, to be honest.
Truly.
It's insulting. And especially because I've spent a lot of time in the San Juan Mountains and this part of Colorado, and just knowing its value in so many different ways far surpasses whatever price tag they could have offered. And it's just the word I just keep coming back to is insulting, because I can't really think of it in any other way.
Well, when what you value is money and you think that's what other people value, you just don't see the bigger picture. And here we're just seeing, and it's sad because I think that this is a story that we hear not just in Indigenous stories, but throughout time and place and throughout the world, is that when we see something that is natural and outside, we try to find the monetary value in it and we exploit it. And it's a story as old as time. And this is exactly what's happening. They want to exploit it for all its resources. And they've found something that can earn them a ton of money. And they think that that's all that matters to anyone. And that's just simply not true. When it's someone's ancestral homelands, when it's somewhere that has been in your family for generations, and you find more value in a place than the money that it's worth, you can't buy that and it be okay. Money doesn't mean anything.
Long gone are the days of waiting to be seen in a doctor's office only to have that awkward conversation with your healthcare provider. WISP gives you access to sexual and reproductive healthcare from the comfort of your home. Get treatment for BV, yeast infections, UTIs, and much more delivered directly to your home or ready for pickup at your local pharmacy in less than 3 hours. The best part? WISP is discreet, convenient, and you don't need medical insurance to receive care or prescription medication. Visit us today at hellowisp.com.
Do you think you have to spend a ton of money or hours in the kitchen to make a truly delicious dinner? You'd be wrong. With every plate, you can whip up incredible meals like crispy buffalo ranch chicken or cheesy Mexican street corn hash, and I promise they taste just as good as anything you'd get at a restaurant. Maybe better because you made it yourself and for way less money. The portions are generous, the ingredients are fresh, and the flavor, genuinely impressive. Every plate is all about making dinner easy without cutting corners on the taste. You get everything you need delivered straight to your door, and the step-by-step recipes are clear, quick, and beginner-friendly. Most come together in 30 minutes or less. If you're stuck making the same meals over and over, this is your sign to mix it up. I love using Every Plate, and you will too. It's helped me really look forward to cooking again. Their rotating weekly recipes keep things interesting, and the value is honestly hard to beat. What are you waiting for? Dig into these flavor-packed meals your household will love. New customers can enjoy this special offer of only $1.99 a meal. Go to everyplate.com/podcast and use code WatchHerCook199 to get started. Applied as discount on first box, limited time only. So, though far from a fair deal, Ute leaders saw it as an act of self-preservation to avoid war. Chipeta's presence at the local negotiations was crucial. Her influence was formally recognized when she became the first known woman invited to sit at the Ute Tribal Council. As a council member, Chipeta continued advocating for unity, the protection of Ute lands, and peaceful solutions to the growing conflicts threatening her people. But even her steady leadership could not hold back the tide of tensions forever.
So now not only are we seeing Chipeta as Ouray's kind of confidant and voice of perspective and reason, like she's being invited to these councils, both her own tribal councils and also meetings with the U.S. government, and she just really has a seat at the table, which is pretty unique for the time. So not only is she a woman, she's also a Native leader who's now sitting, I can just imagine her sitting in D.C., and that is just so out of the norm for what the U.S. government was accustomed to at the time. And I just would love to be a fly on the wall to not only see their reactions, but to witness her and her, just like you said, level-headedness and what she had to say and her advocacy and this like quiet strength that she displayed in advocating for her people. And also kind of, I feel like biting her tongue, because I feel like a lot of what both she and her husband did was recognize the injustices that were being done to them in front of their faces, and had to swallow that or put that aside and kind of take a little bit of that because they knew they weren't going to get everything they wanted. And that takes a lot. It takes a lot to sit there and be diplomatic when you know you're getting such a bad deal, instead of turning to violence and losing it.
Yeah. And I think what's so important about this too, and why Chipeta has gone down in history as important as she was at that time, is because the Americans were painting Indigenous people as a threat and as dangerous and as we've heard throughout time, quote, savages, and to make this scary point of view of Indigenous people for all the outsiders who weren't involved in this to be like, what we're doing is okay because they're violent and scary. And she came forward poised, collected, well-spoken. She came forward and was very level-headed and was the exact opposite of what Americans had been trying to portray Indigenous people as. So people had to sit back and for a moment and be like, wait a second, who is this person? Because this is not who you've described to me, and made people listen to her in that way.
Well, on September 29th, 1879, tensions erupted in what became the defining turning point for the Ute people. The conflict was sparked by Indian agent Nathan Meeker, head of the White River Utes, whose purpose reflected a broader government effort to force Native Americans to abandon their way of life. Driven by the belief that Native peoples needed to be quote-unquote civilized, Indian agencies were turned over to Christian missionaries. They enforced policies that stripped away cultural traditions and pushed Native communities to adopt American customs like farming, Christianity, and boarding schools.
Nathan was growing increasingly frustrated that many of the Ute people were refusing to comply. Eventually, he called for military reinforcements, causing the Utes to retaliate. Approximately 13 to 14 U.S. soldiers, 3 Army Teamsters, and 23 Ute warriors lost their lives, including Nathan Meeker himself. Angered by the events, the Ute people held women and children hostage to use as bargaining chips with the U.S. government. This included Meeker's wife, Arvia, and his daughter, Josephine. Determined to prevent further bloodshed, Chipeta worked alongside Ouray to safely escort the captives to their home, where they were sheltered and cared for until they could be turned over to U.S. officials. In later discussions, Josephine described Chipeta as compassionate, saying, quote, "She did everything she could to make our situation bearable."
Despite her efforts, the damage was done. Public outrage exploded across Colorado, fueled by sensationalized newspaper reports. Many settlers and politicians used the incident as justification for the complete removal of the Ute people from their Colorado homelands, disregarding the decades of broken promises and settler aggression that had pushed the Utes to the brink. When an investigation was launched, Ouray insisted that the discussions be addressed in Washington. A decision would not be fair with the opinions of the biased press in Colorado, which is completely fair.
This time in 1880, Chipeta took the 35-day trip to Washington alongside Ouray, a journey that was incredibly rare for Native women of the time. For Chipeta, it was a courageous return to the political stage, and they were met with hostility from the public upon arrival. However, during this visit, she was invited to serve as a delegate on the investigative council. It didn't take long for Chipeta's grace and poise to change their impression. Newspapers started to praise her quiet strength, noting how few Native women had ever traveled so far or been shown so much respect by U.S. leaders. A reporter described her beauty, noting that her, quote, laugh has a quality of sweetness so rare. It was during this trip that she earned her nickname, Queen of the Utes. At first, this was written by a reporter as a way to mock Chipeta, but it later became a term of deep respect.
During the meetings, Ouray and Chipeta pleaded for their people to remain on their ancestral lands in Colorado, reminding U.S. leaders of the promises made in the Bruno Agreement and other treaties. They emphasized that those responsible for the Meeker violence acted out of frustration after years of injustice and was not a representation of the Utes' true intentions. However, the U.S. government had already made its decision. Despite Chipeta's moving testimony and Ouray's pleas, the government ordered the Ute communities to be forcibly removed from their homelands and relocated to reservations in Utah.
So their second promise, where they're like, no, we promise this time you can be in this part of Colorado, proved to also not be true.
Just a string of shattered promises and for decades. Yep.
The decision devastated Chipeta, Ouray, and the entire Ute Nation. For years, they had fought to protect their people through diplomacy, but their efforts could not stop the wave of broken promises and settler expansion. The exhausting fight took its toll on Ouray, who had long carried the burden of negotiating between two worlds. Weakened by stress and illness, he passed away later that year in 1880. Devastated, Chipeta chopped off all her hair and kept it short for the remainder of her life.
However, after his death, her role as leader and protector did not end. In the years that followed, as thousands of Ute people were forced to leave Colorado for unfamiliar reservation lands in Utah, Chipeta remained a steadfast voice for peace and justice. She traveled, attended political meetings, and continued advocating for her people, especially women and elders, during one of the darkest chapters in Ute history. Chipeta lived to witness decades of change and hardship, yet she never abandoned her commitment to her people. She passed away on August 12, 1924, at the approximate age of 81. Her body was exhumed in 1925 and moved to a mausoleum at the Ouray Memorial Park in present-day Montrose, Colorado. Her legacy lives on as a symbol of strength, compassion, and unwavering dedication to her people. So as we're recording this, we're about to head off for a little adventure in Colorado ourselves. And we are going to be going to, so the first time I really heard about Chipeta, because like I mentioned in the beginning of this, like I knew of Ouray. He's all over the place in Colorado, or at least his name. Mm-hmm. The first time I saw Chipeta and was like, who is this? Is when I was looking into Black Canyon of the Gunnison National Park, which is one of the parks out in Colorado, which we will be visiting in a couple weeks. There is a waterfall named after her, Chipeta Falls. And I was like, oh, what does this mean? Like, because I thought it was just such a beautiful name. Yeah. And I just typed it in, Chipeta, and there it is, boom, Queen of the Utes. And as soon as I saw that she was married to Chief Ouray, I knew I wanted to know more about her, and she didn't disappoint. So I'm so glad we got to look a little bit into her life and give her some of the credit that she's due.
And hopefully visit some places that are named in her honor. Which I also saw there's a mountain named after her.
We'll have to add it to the list.
Yeah, we'll climb a mountain. It's over 13,000 feet, so get your boots on. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in to Watch Her Cook.
If you're looking to dive a little deeper into Chipeta's story, we've dropped some sources for you in the description. Let us know what incredible women's stories you'd like to hear next.
And a big shout out to Sick Bird Productions, who produces our podcast and helps bring these stories to life. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Watch Her Cook Podcast, leave a review, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Just a reminder, empowered women empower the world. Now let's go cook. See you next Wednesday.
This is your before and after story, where your first steps towards a new life-changing career begin. Southeastern College can take you there. We offer in-demand hybrid and online programs with hands-on training, led by in-field career professionals, and career services to put you on the path to a rewarding and fulfilling future. This is where your transformation begins. Southeastern College, your future is bright. Visit sec.edu to get started.
Life is a workout, and Smoothie King is here to help you power through. Whether you're crushing morning miles or sprinting through back-to-back meetings, give your body the energy, protein, and power it needs to help you conquer your goals. Only at Smoothie King.